All right, Robert. Sounds good. Yeah. Okay, so I want to thank you, Liz, for joining us, and welcome to everybody. And thank you for joining our New Hampshire AARP sponsored feast, Creative Feast. My name is Kathy Hoey, and I am your host today. I am also a volunteer at the New Hampshire AARP. Today's event is part of a series with the Creative Feast that we do monthly, focusing on food and its impact on living healthily or healthy living with Liz Barber. Wondering what to make for a Sunday or actually Easter dinner today, Liz will be showing us an Easter dinner that we can cook along mostly with her. AARP has been promoting the health and well-being of older adults for over 60 years. And here in New Hampshire, we thrive to bring you informative, innovative, and fun virtual events like today's online cook-along demonstration as a means of connection and inclusion. AARP has numerous free healthy living resources on its website, from staying fit to wellness and longevity, information on healthy eating, as well as staying sharp. There is something for everyone. And Francis, our volunteer who's going to be monitoring the chat, will put the website in the chat, which is www.aarp.org/healthy living. If you have any questions or comments during the session about AARP New Hampshire or the cooking demonstration, please put them in the chat section, and my fellow volunteer, Francis, will be raising them to Liz as time goes on. Our cooking instructor today is Chef Liz from Hollis, New Hampshire, who built her cooking career in various Boston catering and restaurant venues. She has a very large following of loyal students who enjoy her recipe and teaching styles, and I'm sure she'll share that with us, her website. After starting her family, she re-entered the cooking world as an instructor and developed Liz Barber's Creative Feast. She is a regular guest on New Hampshire's WMUR Cooks Corner, and her cooking demonstrations and recipes, as well as her gardens, have been featured in various publications, including Where Women Cook, New Hampshire Magazine, the Nashua Telegraph, and the New Hampshire Hippo Press. All of her programs focus on the premise that we are healthier when we cook at home, and we hope you all will enjoy today's program. So Liz, take it away. Thank you very
Great.
much.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for joining me today here in my kitchen studio in Hollis, New Hampshire, where we've all been chatting about the weather. It's a beautiful sunny day. It's still a bit chilly here in New Hampshire, which we always expect, but you never know. Tomorrow could be nice and warm, and that's just New England. But I'm looking forward to our class today. I'm going to take you to the website. I'm going to show you where to find the recipes. I did want to mention that we are doing an Easter dinner, and I'd hate to end it without doing a dessert. So I'm throwing in a third recipe, and I'll give you the link to that. So that's not something any of you would have expected to be cooking along with me, but I wanted to show you some technique from that. We are doing a sponge cake. So there are some techniques in there that you may be unfamiliar with. But anyway, so I'm going to take you to my website, share the recipes, and we're going to get right into our two recipes. We're going to be doing a lamb leg. Some of you don't like lamb. You can use a pork roast instead. That's fine. And then we're going to be doing a spinach au gratin, which I love. And I'll be talking about some, ways that you can change that up too. So let me first take you to my website. I'm going to share my my screen, and we will check that out. And so here's the website, The Creative Feast. So you are welcome to check that out. Certainly, if you are interested in online programming, if you live far away, you can share this with garden clubs, your library, whatever, and then we can schedule that. I do in-person lectures. All that information is here. If you want to check my calendar, there's a calendar here, and that does stay up to date. And then, of course, the AARP, we do this once a month on Tuesdays. So I hope that you'll continue to join me. Here where it says food and fun, this is the recipe blog. And for you, for my AARP friends, I've created this. So if you come over, you hit recipe blog and come over to where it says the 2024. Those are the recipes for this year. Of course, we did this last year too, and we've been doing it for a few years actually, but I have them all curated here for 2023 too. So do check those out. And if you want to just look at my recipe blog in general, there are so many recipes here for you to enjoy, including the ones that we're doing today. So you can go through that and check that out. But for the purposes of you and your affiliation with AARP, this is a drop down for you. And here, of course, are the recipes for the season. And this is where you're going to find the butterfly leg of lamb and the spinach gratin. So also for next month, we're going to be doing cookbook favorites from the Silver Palette Cookbook. Some of you may be longtime fans. These were my two favorite recipes from way back when. They're still excellent, and so we'll be doing those two recipes. So those are here for you. You'll sign up with AARP. They'll share their recipes, but you can always come to my website and look there as well. And so that's all that information there. Do go to the website for other recipes if you'd like. I also wanted to share with you, this is the Garden Conservancy website. This is a national organization, and my gardens will be on tour. So if you live in the New England area, if you travel up in New Hampshire during the summer, you can check out my gardens. My garden tour is on June 15th, and other local gardens are there. So the tickets go on sale April 1st. You can check that out. But I always like to let people know what's going on with that, because I typically do have an open garden every summer that I run. And but this year I have donated my garden for the day to the Garden Conservancy. And so it will be available for people to come and see. But it's time to get cooking. Now I've got my stove on. We are using the broiler for the leg of lamb, which is what I am doing right now. I'm going to do the lamb first. So I'm going to move my other ingredients off to the side. This lamb recipe is so simple, but it is a good idea. I didn't do it today because I wanted to share this live with you. It is always a good idea. I'm just grabbing a can. Of course, it's the most difficult one to get out. I'm going to share with you how to break down your lamb. And then I'm going to marinate it, but it'll be marinated just for right now. Typically, you want to do this. I would do it 24 hours in advance. That way, the meat will absorb those wonderful flavors even more. But does it require that you do that? No. But the longer you marinate for, I'm just looking for another bowl. The longer you're marinating it for, the tastier it is. So I'm just going to get these things ready. And these are my marinade ingredients. We have Dijon mustard. Whatever Dijon mustard you like. I like a real spicy one. The Grey Poupon is nice. Some soy sauce. We need 2 tablespoons of soy sauce. A garlic clove, which we're going to mince. I'm using fresh rosemary today because I don't have dry, but you certainly can use dry. Also, it calls for dry or ground ginger. Certainly, if you want to use fresh, you can. What I do like to point out is if you're using dry herbs, you'll use, for example, maybe the recipe calls for half a teaspoon. If you're using fresh, you always want to double it or more. Okay, fresh always is more, because the concentrated flavor in the dry means you can use less. So if you're using ginger, fresh ginger has a nice strong flavor, but you'd want to use maybe a teaspoon or 2 for the ginger. We're using dried today. Okay, and then a little bit of olive oil. So I will blend those together in just a few minutes. But I wanted to show you our leg of lamb. And actually, let me do it on this larger tray so that it gives me a little bit more space without getting my cutting board a mess. So this is a boneless leg of lamb. You can find them on sale now, usually for Easter. So essentially, they've taken the bone out and then they put it in um, this like almost like a bag. You know, it's very flexible. They put it in there to keep it all together, and you can certainly roast it with this on. I caution people because lamb is noted because it's a very fatty meat, and the fat is very strong in flavor. So if you're somebody who would like to do a leg of lamb, but you think, oh, it's so gamey tasting, and I don't know that I'd call it gamey, but it's definitely very strong in flavor. What you want to do is take that bag off, and you want to peel off some of this fat because the fat does have a lot of that gamier flavor. And for example, when I turn it over like this, I can see how thick this cap of fat is. So basically, I take a nice sharp knife. This is my boning knife. You can use a chef's knife if you want. And I try to peel away most of the fat. I like to leave some because it gives it a little bit of a crispy outside. But where it's nice and super thick, I do take that off. Now I have some chickens, so they love getting this fat. So I just chop it up nice and small and give it to them, and they have a field day with it. But again, here I am peeling off this fat. Okay. Now, say you did not want to do the roasted leg of lamb. Say you much prefer lamb chops. You could do that and use the same marinade that I have, and that would be really nice on those. So you could just marinate those for a few hours or overnight, and then you'd get the same wonderful flavor. Just a little bit of a history on this recipe. I am a fan of old recipe books, and so I did a project a couple years ago where I went to my local historical society and asked them if they had copies of the local church cookbooks or cookbooks from the women's clubs. We used to do those as fundraisers before the internet came along, and it was a wonderful way to share recipes from local cooks. And so, sure enough, they had all these wonderful cookbooks. And so I went through them and discovered that some of the women that I had heard about, but who may have passed away. They were legends in the town. Their recipes were in these books. And one in particular was Kay Gregg, and her husband was the governor of the state of New Hampshire, and her son was a senator in Washington. So I love the history, and I happen to have the privilege of knowing Kay when she was in her early 80s. So it was a real joy to find her recipe. And this was her recipe for her Easter lamb. And I just love how simple it is and how it just turned out perfect anytime I did it. So now you can see that I've cut off a lot of that fat, all right? And now when you do a butterflied leg of lamb, basically they've cut it off the bone, and so you can just simply open this up, and now essentially that is butterflied. Now, one section of this lamb is pretty thick, and that's here. So you want to make sure that it's reasonably the same thickness throughout the entire leg. So what I'm going to do is, because this is almost double thickness, I'm going to cut this from the inside to the out, kind of cutting it in half, and then it'll kind of flap open. I won't cut it all the way off. I'll just cut it so it releases it. And now the entire leg of lamb is pretty much the same thickness. And that's going to be key in having this cooked in the same amount of time evenly. All right. Again, my broiler is on. I've got it so that the pan that I'm going to cook this in is going to go 5 inches below the flame, all right, or below the coils. Now let's just go ahead and get our ingredients together. So we have our soy sauce. That was 2 tablespoons. I'm just going to grab a little spoon here. I've got my Dijon mustard. This is a very mustard heavy lamb. Okay. And my ginger, my dried ginger. All right. And a little bit of olive oil. I always use olive oil, canola oil. We don't want to use seed oils. Those are highly processed. They're inflammatory. We want to move away from those. Olive oil, extra virgin olive oil, coconut oil. You could even use, if you have chicken fat, bacon fat would be fine in this. And then we're going to go ahead and chop up we have our garlic. And I'm just going to get that peel right off. And certainly if you have any questions as I go along, don't hesitate to put them in the chat so that we can get those answered for you. Now, this is my garlic rocker. I love this tool. So do check that out. I just look up garlic rocker on Amazon or in your favorite kitchen store. Basically, it's the easiest way to mince your garlic. I take the back of my knife and scrape it right off. And that is all set. I didn't even have to get my hands messy for that. And then I have my rosemary, and I'm going to chop that up. If you're using dry, of course, you can just, whenever I use dry herbs, I try to, move them with my hands, give them a little bit of a shake and a rub, and that kind of opens up the oils in there. So it may add to the flavor. Now I'm using just a teaspoon of rosemary, but if you love rosemary, use more. I mean, you can't go wrong, in my opinion. All right. Now remember, again, this is a marinade that ideally you'd want to leave on your lamb for a couple of hours. But as I explained before, I just wanted to show you how to do the lamb. And then we can go ahead and I'm just doing it for the purposes of the demonstration where I'm just putting this on right now. But the longer you marinate, the more flavorful it is. I'll tell you though, I don't think I'm going to miss out on flavor. The Dijon mustard is going to add a lot of wonderful flavor to this. Now, if you were doing this on, say, lamb chops, what you could also do is you could marinate your lamb chops in this. You want to leave that on the lamb chops when you put them under their broiler, or you could put them in a pan and you could roast them in your oven at 400, 450 degrees and put breadcrumbs right on top too. That's another nice way to do it. All right, so there we go. Super easy. That's it. All right. And that's why I love this kind of recipe, especially if I'm, going to someone's house. Keep it nice and simple. You could arrive at the house like this and then say, oh, I'm just going to stick this in your broiler. We'll be all set. Okay, so here's my broiling pan. You could spray the bottom if you like. I do like to take, let me just grab my tin foil. I like to take some tin foil and that just makes clean up a little bit easier. Put that right on the bottom. And yes, I do have my rack. We're going to turn this over throughout the cooking. So we're going to start here first with the top facing up. And then we're going to put that right into our oven. And I am going to have my instant read thermometer ready. So you can use 2 different kinds of thermometers. An instant read thermometer is one of these probes that you're going to stick in, but you have to remove the meat from the oven. Then you stick it in, you read the thermometer, and then you remove this. You don't leave this in. Or you can use what I've got here. Why don't I set this up actually? This will be fun to use. I highly recommend this anytime you have to cook chicken or meat or something in the oven where the temperature is critical to the finished product, right? So we want to take this out at about 130 for medium rare because it's going to raise in temperature as it sits. So what you do is you set this so that the timer, the buzz, the beeper will go off once you've hit a certain temperature. So I'm going to go at, I'm just going to play it safe at 132, see how that works. And then I'm going to take this probe and I'm going to stick it into the center of the meat. Okay, so that it's right in the center, not up and down, but in the center of the meat this way. So I know that it's sitting right in the middle. And it's telling me right now that my current temperature is 48 degrees. So we're going to go for about 15 minutes on each side. And I'm going to keep an eye on this. This is going right into my broiler. Okay, and I partially close my oven. Leave it open just a little bit, and that's going to cook away. So let's cross our fingers and see how that goes. All right. So that's our first recipe. We are going to turn that over. I'm going to set my timer for about 15 minutes so that I'll remember to look at the temperature again. And then we will go ahead and check on that, turn it over, and then cook the other side. Okay, ladies, do we have any questions before I go on?
Well, the only question I have is, where is the recipe for the sponge cake?
Oh, I'm sorry. So let me take you there. I'm going to share my screen. Thank you for reminding me. I had it queued up and then I didn't do it. So let's do that. Oops. Okay. So if we go to where it says food and fun and it says, where did I have it? Recipes from Hollis. Okay, so that's my hometown. And you hit that. And then you will see actually both these recipes. Here's the sponge cake. This is the recipe I'm going to be doing at the end of class. And oh, look, this is a full Easter meal. You could do the mint glazed carrots and peas. Scripture cake, if anybody would like to do an Easter scripture cake. Perfect. And then all the way down, and there is the butterflied leg of lamb. So all of that is actually here. Again, this is under recipes from Hollis, and that's where you'll find that. So thank you for reminding me that. I had forgotten.
And one other question. Why did you leave the door open for the leg of lamb?
Well, it's in with the broiler, and you know, if it gets super hot and you know, you can get fat, especially when you turn that over, it's flashing up. You want to be careful because the flame is pretty close to it. So I just keep it open a crack when I'm using the broiler. And that actually, you'll find that for most ovens, the manufacturer recommends that you do that. So just keep a really close eye on it. Okay.
And
all right.
One other question is, could you use the same marinade for a pork roast? And then we'll let you get back to it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. You can. It's just going to be so nice, nicely flavored. I actually like that same marinade to put on chicken and salmon as well, which is really nice. Okay. All right. So let's go on to our spinach au gratin, and I'm just going to, I want to make sure that I pull that recipe up for myself to make sure that I've got all the ingredients for you. So this is a big spinach heavy side dish, which I love. It's not mostly cheese, but it's mostly spinach. And I do use frozen spinach because it's so much easier and less expensive to do it this way, and it tastes just as good, and you don't have to pre-cook it. If you want to use fresh spinach, that's fine, but it would take quite a bit of spinach in order, you know, to make this recipe, because you know, when you chop up spinach and you cook it, it shrinks to almost nothing. Okay. So that's why I like to use the frozen spinach. Now, the spinach has been thawed, and it's 3 pounds. And so the spinach is very wet. Okay, as you know, greens are very wet. So what we want to do is we want to squeeze out as much of the excess water as possible. So I put it in a strainer over a bowl, or you could do it right over the sink. I do it over the bowl. I capture the spinach water and I give it to my chickens. They love it. You can take this in your hand and you can give it a good squeeze. You can see how much water is just coming out of that. So you want to get rid of as much water as you can whenever you're cooking something. If you're making a quiche with spinach, you want to get that extra water out because it does affect too much water in something like that will just make it a mushy dish. So again, getting as much of that water out of the spinach as I can. And then save that spinach water. You could use that in a drink if you were doing a smoothie, a vegetable smoothie. You could use that for cooking pasta if you were going to have a spinach pasta of some sort or a dark sauce. There's no reason to throw that out because you've got some nutrients in there and you can use it for almost anything. If you were going to make a vegetable soup, that would be nice in that. You could freeze it and save it for that. Okay, so we've got that. Now, we're going to first get our onions done. We've got some vegetables to start building flavor. So I'm going to show you my favorite demonstration on how to cut an onion. I know I've done this before. We always use a sharp knife. I'm going to cut the onion in half from the top to the bottom. So from the root to the stem. We've got 2 onions in this. All right. And then after we've cut it in half, it's so much easier to grab those peels and peel them off. Also, I like to remind people when you are buying onions at the grocery store, especially this time of year, because the onions now, they've been in keeping for a while, right? They're not necessarily fresh out of the ground. So they tend to get a little bit on the soft side if they've been stored for a long time. So you do want to make sure that you give those onions a nice firm grab at the grocery store. If it feels soft in any way, don't buy that onion because it's possible that the inside layer has started to go bad and soften up. I've had it where the layers of the onion, not from the outside but from the inside, are getting soft, and that's just no fun because then you have to throw out the entire onion. And there's nothing more frustrating than having just bought an onion, going to use it for a recipe and find out that it's not good. So always give it a nice firm squeeze to see that it is firm all the way through. Now we're going to go ahead and cut off our stem end from our onions. And then you can, we're going to dice them. So the easiest way to do that is to cut them down to the root, all right? And then cut across. And now they are all diced and it's super easy, all right? So I'll do that again so you can see that. Again, cut down to the root. And I do that without going through because then the root end will hold the whole onion together. The thinner the slices are, the smaller your dicing is. Now, I have no problem if you are a busy person or, maybe, you have a little arthritis in your hand, holding a knife is not comfortable. Maybe it's just not your favorite thing. Could you buy pre-chopped onions? Of course you can. You can even buy them in the freezer section. I don't have a problem with that because the end result is that you are preparing this meal yourself and you know exactly what has gone into the ingredients. You make sure if you're going to buy pre-processed vegetables, so look at the ingredients. You never know. Sometimes these manufacturers are putting in preservatives. You don't want those. The preservatives are inflammatory. They're not good for you. So do try to avoid these foods that do have extra preservatives in them, especially when we certainly don't need that. Okay, I'm just going to toss these in here. And we're going to go ahead and get this over to the stove. I'm just going to check my lamb here. Okay, it is browning up beautifully. And I'm going to show that to you in just a few minutes. We've got about 7 minutes on there. Now, if you think that it's browning up too quickly, you can turn your broiler down from high to medium. So I think I'm going to drop that down to medium just so it doesn't burn, because you still need it to be in there for that close to 15 minutes on each side. All right, so here are our onions. We're going to go ahead and we're going to heat up our stove, or heat up our pan. Now, I do have here a stainless steel pan. You're welcome to use that, but I thought it was very bright in the light, so I just thought, well, I'll just use my cast iron. And I have to say, I love to use my cast iron pan as often as I can, because cast iron actually, it's a wonderful, healthy material to be cooking out of. Get a little bit of that extra iron in there without having any issues. So I do like to cook in cast iron. I just love the feel of the pans. They're easy to use, and a good quality cast iron pan can't be beat so far as heating up evenly. Okay, so we've got our pan heating up. We're going to add 4 tablespoons of butter. So we're not shy on the butter here. You can use salted or unsalted, whatever you like. Just don't use butter substitutes, because those have chemicals in them or highly processed ingredients. We want to use the full, real butter when we're cooking. Okay, so that's going to be much healthier for you. So do use that. And then we have a little bit of nutmeg we're going to be adding to give it a little bit of flavor. I prefer to use fresh nutmeg, mainly because I don't use a lot of nutmeg, and so having a jar of it, it tends to lose its flavor over time. And so it's so much easier just to buy a couple of nutmegs and a nice nutmeg grater, because you don't use a lot at a time. It's one of those spices that you want to be careful you don't use too much, because it will overpower. It's just an essence of a flavor. All right, so I'm just double checking my lamb. We're good. My butter is melting. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and add in our onions. And our goal here with the onions is to just soften them up. Okay, we're just going to give that a nice stir, and we're going to let them soften up for about 5 minutes or so. If you have a lid, you can put that onto your pan, and that will help just lower your heat down to medium. We always start with a medium heat. Put the lid on, and that will help to steam the onions, and they will cook faster. So that's a really nice tip to keep aware of. And then once that's done, we're going to add in our nutmeg, and then we're going to add in, we've got 1 cup of heavy cream, and then we've got 2 cups of whole milk. Use the full fat, because that's going to add really good creaminess. And we don't want to be afraid of fat. Fat actually is very satiating, and it helps us to be satisfied sooner, so that we actually eat less later. So keep that in mind. We want to go back to our full fat dairies, keep good healthy fats in our diets. We're also going to do a little bit of thickening with our flour. That's going to help us out. We've got salt and pepper here, and then we're going to finish this with a little bit of cheese. I'm going to take out some of this. This is grated Parmesan. We've got about 1 cup. I'm going to take a half a cup to sprinkle on top, so that we have that nice crispy topping. So let's go ahead and check back with our onions and see how they're doing. Okay, and they're softening up beautifully without burning. So that steaming helps them to soften up without burning. Okay, now let that continue on. I'm going to take out my lamb just a little bit early so we can see how it's doing. I'm looking at, remember, I put in my probe, so it's actually sitting on the outside of the oven, so I can see that the temperature of our lamb has gone up to 78 degrees. So it's going up pretty quickly. I lowered that temperature down to medium. And so our lamb is browning up. I'm just going to bring this out so you can take a peek. I'm going to grab this off here. And you can see that this has browned up beautifully. It's not burnt, it's just browning up. So when I move that to the side, you can see it's still cooking away. It's going to be absolutely delicious. I'm going to pop this back in the oven. We have well, actually we have a minute left. So why don't I go ahead and while it's out, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over, and then we don't have to worry about doing that in a few minutes. So you're going to grab some tongs. I have so many pairs of tongs in there. So I just take these and I'm going to lift from the side and turn it right over. Now, this side is going to brown up beautifully. Now, I only put this, the marinade on one half. Obviously, if you are doing this in a bag, marinating it in a dish, you want to do it on both sides. Here, what I'm going to do, just to save me, do a little bit of salt and pepper. You can see how beautifully brown that is. Okay, so you could do it on one side or on both sides, but typically if you're going to marinate it overnight, you're going to be turning it over a couple of times. Okay, now we're going to put this back in to our broiler. And I'm going to keep an eye on that temperature and see how quickly that goes up. Move these off to the side. Time to add our nutmeg. So we're going to, let's see, we've got add the nutmeg and the flour to our onions. Oops, there's a little nutmeg tossed in here. There we go. So I'm going to take my nutmeg and give it a little bit of a scrape. And again, it's just a little bit, whoops, just to add a little bit of flavor to that. All right. And then we have a 1/4 cup of flour, and that's going to go in, and we want to give the flour a chance to cook so that it cooks out that floury, pasty flavor. All right. So keep that in mind. We're going to go ahead, give that a little stir. And then our next step is to be adding that heavy cream in the milk, and then that's going to thicken up, and it's essentially going to be like a roux, okay, or a bechamel, sometimes, you know, like a creamy sauce, okay? But give that a minute or so, again, for that flour flavor to cook off. And that's really critical when you're making a pie filling or something that has a lot of flour in it, or you're making a sauce with a lot of flour. You need to give it time to cook off that extra floury flavor. Okay, and then we're going to go ahead and add the cream and the milk. So let's get those two. Now, what if you don't have heavy cream and you go to make this? Go ahead and just use an extra cup of milk. What if you don't have, what if all you have is half and half? You could use that too. The flour is going to help to thicken it. Just make sure you're using full fat. We don't want low fat anything in our diet. We want that full fat because that's going to give rich flavor, but also that satisfaction. Ladies, do we have any questions at this point?
No questions at this time.
Excellent.
Got them all
Great.
wrapped.
Okay. All right. So we've added that in. And now that's our heavy cream. And then we're going to go ahead and add in, you see how that's thickened up so quickly, right? I'm going to add in our milk. Now, you can add some other flavorings to this if you'd like. Like for those of you who like that spanakopita flavor, you could add some fresh dill to this, and this would be delicious. You could add basil to it. You could add parsley to it. If you wanted to add rosemary to this, that would be fine too. So you can add herbs to this to make it into, you know, to give it more of a rich flavor if that's what you're looking for. The other thing that you could do, let me just set my timer. I forgot to for the lamb. Add another 15 minutes. So you could also do this if you had, I was thinking, how could I make this more of a full meal? What you could do is you could add like cooked shredded chicken to this, and then it would be a whole different casserole, but it would certainly be delicious. So if you had shredded cooked chicken, you could add that to this at the very end, just stir it all together and then bake it, and it would be delicious. You could do that with, I suppose you could do that with shrimp if you wanted, or leftover. I was thinking today, that's a good sized leg of lamb for just my husband and I. So what am I going to do with the extra lamb? If it's cooked, I could actually add it. If I were making the spinach gratin, I could add the cooked lamb to that, and that would be an amazing casserole. So these are wonderful flavors and things to think about for when you're making this yourself. Okay. Now we've got about a teaspoon of salt and half a teaspoon of pepper here. We're getting ready to add in our spinach. So we're going to just bring this liquid to a little bit of a simmer here. Again, it's just so all the flavors are cooked out, and this is getting nice and thick. Okay, it's not going to be super thick because we're going to add our spinach, and that's essentially going to be a thickener for us. But we do want to get that just up to temperature a little bit. And then we're going to go ahead and add this. We did that. We're thickening that. We're going to add the spinach, half a cup of Parmesan, and season to taste with the salt and pepper. So let's get that all set. In goes our spinach. Okay. Again, we're going to bring that up to a simmer. And now this spinach is going to be beautifully creamy. Okay. You can see how that is also helping to thicken this up. Our cream and our milk have begun to thicken. So you're going to see it's going to get much less liquid available. We're going to add our half a cup of Parmesan cheese. Okay. I'm going to turn down my temperature just so it doesn't, we don't want to burn that or anything. And then I would taste this at this point to decide how much salt and pepper you want to add. You can add the full amount or a little bit, but I would taste it first, depending on how salty your cheese is. You don't want to over salt it. So I'm just going to add a little bit of that. Now, another thing that would be really nice in here is a little bit of lemon. I happen to have some lemon juice left over from the cake, so I'm going to just sprinkle that in rather than letting that go to waste. And then I'm going to go ahead and bring our casserole over to the table, and we can put it into our baking pan. I have a 9 by 13 inch baking pan. And let's bring that over. Okay, and pop that into our baking pan. Oh, this is going to be so good. You could break this up into 2 separate baking pans if you wanted to. You could put it in one, and then once it cools down, you could freeze. If you wanted to put it into 2, you could freeze one of them and then cook it up another time if you needed it. So there we have that. And we're going to sprinkle. We have Gruyere cheese. You could use cheddar cheese. You could use any kind of, if you wanted to use mozzarella cheese, you could use feta cheese. It's just a way to finish this off and give it a little bit of a cheesy top. And then, of course, we have our Parmesan. And that's it. You could do this to this point a day or 2 in advance, and then heat it up before, right before dinner. Or if you're traveling with this to a relative's house, you could finish it up at their house in the oven. It just takes about 15 or 20 minutes. at 450 degrees. So I'm going to pop it into the oven, and then we'll check on that in a little bit. My lamb is now at 86 degrees, so it'll heat up pretty quickly at this point. So I'm keeping an eye on that. Got about 10 minutes on my timer, so we'll see how that goes. Ladies, do we have any questions before I go on to our cake, which I'm so excited we're going to have plenty of time for?
They just wondered where that was a nutmeg grater, right? And
yes, yep, I'll show that to you. It's a very inexpensive little grater. You can hang it on the wall if you want. Mine got a little bent, so I always put my little nutmeg, whoops, right in there, the little nut, and then I just close it over the top, and then I've got it in my drawer. So it's really super simple. Again, I do that because I don't use nutmeg in a lot of recipes, and it's very expensive. So if you have the nuts, then it's always fresh every time you do it.
and they were also wondering if you could talk about the various oils again.
Yes, yeah. So I always like to mention this because I know so many of us at this point in our lives, you know, we're feeling some inflammation in our joints, and also, you know, puffiness in our faces. And a lot of this, I would say, well, I'm not a doctor, but I know from my research and what I've been reading, a lot of this is caused by the food that we're putting in our bodies. So if you are eating foods out of boxes and packages that are pre-made, cooked, even if, say, you go to the restaurant every night, you don't know what's in those foods. So it's important that you understand. So some of the things that you should be avoiding, one of the most important things to avoid are these highly processed oils, because they do cause inflammation. Our bodies are not intended to digest these in the same way that we do natural fat. So let's first talk about what is a natural fat that you should be eating. Well, it's a natural fat that is a healthy fat is butter, for example. All that is milk. That's the cream of the milk that has been churned in such a way that it then turns into butter. There can't be anything more natural than that, right? It's a cold process, and then you add a little bit of salt, or you don't, and that's simple. So that is one. Animal fats are natural fats. So the fat that comes from our lamb might be a little gamey. It's not something I personally would cook with, but I do cook with bacon fat. I do cook with chicken fat. So duck fat is another one. So these are good natural fats that don't require any kind of special processing other than to cook them out and render the fat from the item that the meat that you're cooking. Now, the other oils that are important, these are also good fats for you, are olive oil. So olive oil and extra virgin olive oil, you don't have other oils added to them. So make sure, I know it sounds crazy, I'm buying olive oil. Well, check to make sure the ingredients say just olive oil, because manufacturers, they don't care about your health. They care about their dollar bottom line. And I know that there are a lot of oils out there where they're mixing them and they call it something else. They call it like a light oil, but maybe they've thrown in some canola oil, or they've thrown in some seed oil, some safflower seed oil, in order to save their bottom line. So it could be olive oil mixed with canola oil. This is not a good combination. You only want to be consuming the olive oil, extra virgin olive oil. Make sure, if possible, that they're cold pressed. The heating does cause some breakdown of the nutrients in these oils. Avocado oil, coconut oil, seed oils in particular are very highly processed. Imagine what it takes to get oil from a sunflower seed. First of all, it takes many seeds. Second of all, these seed oils take multiple steps in the processing. And in canola oil, for example, bleaching is one of those steps because it is a dirty, smelly oil. And so the manufacturer has to clean it up. So in that 12-step process, there is a part where it's actually cleaning it with bleach. So you don't want these oils in your diet. So if you were to look in my pantry today, you would see very little products that are that come in boxes. I just don't do that because I can read the ingredients. So I always like to make sure people understand that's the first step in you turning your health around, is to read the ingredients. If you cannot pronounce it, if it's not natural in nature, don't consume it. And we can simplify our diet so much more by just buying really good whole foods and eating those. You don't have to make a fancy dinner every night, but you do want to make sure that you're eating real food. Okay. So that's my spiel on oils. I hope I didn't overdo it. So, okay, I'm going to pull out our ingredients for our cake so that I can show you that. And this does call for a mixer. Now, you guys are just watching this. The recipe, as I mentioned, is on my website under recipes from Hollis. So if you look at that, then you'll have that. So I'm just going to pull this up so I have this in front of me. Okay. Now, we're going to have a couple of bowls here. Now, this is a chiffon cake or a sponge cake. And what gives this cake the height and the lift is you're separating your eggs. So we're going to have our egg yolks that we're going to combine with our sugar, a half a cup of our sugar, and we're going to whip that. And then separately, we're going to do our egg whites, and then we're going to combine the two. So having both of those whipped properly, when you go to bake them, they give the cake the height. So you don't need baking soda or baking powder, okay? So the other thing that's gonna help this go a little bit quicker, where you're gonna get more lift in your egg whites and your egg yolk, is if they're at room temperature. So I always, separate my eggs in the morning, let them sit at room temperature while I'm doing everything, get all my ingredients together, and then I go ahead and do the baking. So let me just grab a spatula. And before we go on to this, were there any more questions about the two recipes that we did previously?
Well, this was a question about the oils. And they said, if they're going to grease a cake pan, what would you use? And I was going to say like a lard, like an animal fat, but you're the expert,
Right.
so.
Right. So I like that you mentioned lard. So lard, you can get at the grocery store. It is a pork product. And not that it tastes like pork, but if you want a really fine lard, you want what's called leaf lard. That's a little bit more difficult to find. But, well, what did your grandmother use? She probably used butter. Butter is the best. So whenever I have a recipe, a baking recipe that calls for canola oil or vegetable oil, I just do melted butter. It's so much more tasty too. So you cannot go wrong using melted butter instead of these bad oils. Okay. All right, folks. So my buzzer is going off, but I'm still at 111 degrees temperature in my lamb. So it's really great that I bought that probe that stays in the lamb. So I'm going to let it continue to cook. I'm just going to take a little bit of a peek at it, and it's turning nice and brown. So I'm going to let this stay where it is and continue on with our recipes. So here we have our egg yolk, and I'm going to add in half a cup of sugar, all right, and 2 tablespoons of water. Now, why? Well, this is a recipe from one of my local, again, out of the old cookbooks. from Hollis, and this woman, her name is Eleanor Whittemore, and she was our first woman select board member here in Hollis. And she, I don't know where she would have gotten this recipe, but it added water to it. So I just stuck to her recipe, figuring she probably knows what she's doing. So I'm going to go ahead and whip this up. And what we're doing here is we're going to, let me just stop this for a second. So we have to, maybe I'll do this by hand too, because it's quieter. We have to whip this up so that gets nice and frothy. So if you take a big balloon whip like this, and you whip this up, it's going to turn the color of the egg into a much lighter yellow. All right, now, yes, you can use your electric mixer if you want, but I'm just gonna go ahead and do it by hand, give myself a good workout. And this is going to get to the consistency of mayonnaise is what you're looking for. And so what that does is it helps to melt the sugar, right? So it's not grainy, but it also with those egg yolks, it's that fat. You're breaking up the fat. You're pushing air into the fat. So this is a really important step because remember I told you we're not using baking powder or baking soda. We are relying on the air that we're pushing in, okay? So this is only partially done, but my arm is getting a little bit tired. So I'm going to, let me just see if I can bring my whole apparatus here up. I'm going to go ahead and, whoops, whisk this up. We're almost done. Okay, so again, you're pushing air. We're looking for this to be more like mayonnaise and a lighter, much lighter yellow color. So just be patient with this for a second here, and I'll show you exactly what I mean. It's thickening up little by little. Could use a standing mixer if you have that. But I can see already that it's getting these nice trails in here, and it's getting nice and thick. So if you can see, it's just starting to thicken up beautifully. Another 30 seconds or so. Okay. So there are our egg yolks with the sugar and a little bit of water. Now I'm gonna get ready. We're gonna do our egg whites in just a second. Now notice I'm washing these off. I don't want any fat on my beaters because the fat will inhibit my egg white from fluffing up, okay? From whipping up. So you want to make sure you get rid of all of the fat, and you're going to use obviously a bowl that doesn't have any fat in it. So we have this combined, and we're going to add in, all right? So we're looking for soft. So you can see there are trails in here when I whip this, and you see how much lighter this is. And it's almost doubled, almost tripled in size because we pushed all of this air inside here. Now to this, we're going to add, we have the zest, about a teaspoon, but I love a nice lemony flavor. So I added the zest from the entire lemon. And then we're gonna add a tablespoon of lemon juice and a teaspoon of good vanilla, okay? And then we're just gonna mix that in. And now we have our flavoring in here, okay? And we're gonna set that aside, and that's all set. And now it's time to do our egg whites. Before I do that, I'm going to take one quick look at my lamb. Okay, you're going to love this. We've got a few more minutes. It's at 128 degrees. So you're going to love how this is going to look. It's looking perfect right now. So put these back on. Get our egg white. Okay. And we're going to whip these. Again, no fat in here, no egg yolk in here. So you have to be very careful when you separate. We're going to get this foamy. So you're going to see the difference. Right now, we're breaking up the egg white. All right. And then they're going to get nice and foamy and almost opaque looking. So almost a bright white. Okay. So this is foamy, but it is not thickened. So let me just grab a big spoon so you can see what I mean. Kind of hard in the bowl, but it's got some foam to it, and that's what we're looking for. All right, that buzzing is telling me that my lamb has reached the internal temperature that I want it to reach. Okay, so I'm going to turn that off, and I'm going to bring the lamb out and let it rest. And I'm going to do that off camera so I can surprise you with how beautiful this is. Let me just grab something to pull this out with. And then I'm going to let it rest while we finish up this cake. And you'll see how gorgeous this is. Okay. Now we're going to add our cream of tartar. This is going to help maintain, it keeps your egg whites, it keeps them from deflating. So it's almost like a stabilizer. You want to add that in. And then I'm going to add my cup of sugar, about a tablespoon at a time. And we're looking for this to be thick, but not dry. And so that's a little bit of a hard distinction. So I want to share that with you once we get there. But you can see it is thickening up and it's trying to quadruple in size. So you're pushing air. Always remember this. When you're whipping egg yolks or egg whites, the whole goal is to push air into them so that they maintain their loft in your recipe. Now I'm just going to stop this. So you can see here that this is still very soft, right? Because when I do that, it kind of drizzles off my spoon. Okay, so we're going to need another 30 seconds or so. Almost there. Okay, so what this is doing is when I lift this up, okay, this is standing in its peaks, okay? You see how it's hanging off of my spoon without falling? But it's not overly dry. If it's dry, it's almost like you can cut it in half and you can see I'm just trying to describe. Sometimes that's the hardest part of describing a recipe. This looks soft and pillowy. when it's dry, it'll have edges to it when you break it in half. But this is soft and pillowy, and that's what we're looking for. I think I got that. Okay, so now our goal is to gently fold these together. So folding is a whole other skill. And I recommend that when you do that, I just brought a little bit more air to this, you try to get yourself a larger spatula for that. So I'm going to add my egg yolks. I'm just going to pour them right in. Okay. Pour them right in. Folding is another technique. And basically, you just go around the edge, lift it and drop. Lift it and drop. So it's not a stir, it's a lift and drop. And that's how we're bringing them together. And I dive in the middle and bring it around the edge. Dive in the middle and bring it around the edge. So you just need to very gently combine those, the yolks and the whites without deflating them. Okay. All right. Now it's time to add our flour. So we'll add a couple tablespoons at a time. There's a little bit of salt mixed in with that to give us a little contrast in the sugar. Okay, so just a couple tablespoons at a time. This is 1 cup. Now I'm using a cake flour or a pastry flour. I have done this with regular all-purpose flour and it's been just fine. So don't worry too much about that. The cake flour is going to make it a little bit lighter, but I don't make a lot of cakes, so to buy cake flour, it would sit in my pantry forever. So I do a lot of bread baking and I use all-purpose flour for that. So you can certainly use all-purpose for this and it's just fine. Do we have any questions, ladies? We're almost done with this cake and then ready to cut into our lamb so everyone can see.
Okay, for the cakes, can you use a carton of egg whites or the egg whites from the eggs?
Real deal, ladies, real deal. The problem is that you don't know what's in those egg whites in the carton. You have to use egg yolks anyway. So you're going to separate them. So you're going to use the entire egg. Nothing's going to waste. That's another thing I like about this.
Okay.
So, yep.
Can you use almond flour in your cake?
So I am not a gluten-free baker. So I don't recommend you just substitute one type of flour like almond or whole wheat for all-purpose or cake flour because they have different amounts of protein and they behave in different ways. So you could certainly look up a recipe for a chiffon cake or a sponge cake using almond flour if you prefer.
Did you sift the flour?
It says to sift the flour, but I was lazy and I did not sift the flour.
All right, and one last question is, we can see that your lamb is sitting there not covered. Should we, can we cover our lamb?
Oh, you can see it.
Yes.
You
Well, we
yes,
can see it far away. It's a far away.
Okay, all right. Yes. So for the recipe, it says to cover it for 5 minutes and then slice into it because, of course, you want to serve it hot. So yes, I'm just letting it rest for a few minutes like that. But certainly, covering it will keep it nice and hot. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and pour this in. So I am using, this is an Angel Food cake pan. And the recipe said, do not oil or butter the pan. And it works, okay? So I'm going to go ahead. Let me just, before I do that, I want to check on my, I'm going to take out my gratin. And probably let it go a minute too long, but that's okay. You can see how beautiful that is. I'm going to lower the temperature on my stove so that I can bake this when we're done with class. But in this goes, make sure, do double check that you have in fact folded all of the flour through. That I noticed I it looks like I didn't do that in one spot. So I'm just double checking. I continue to fold so that it has that loft. And then I'm going to go ahead, pour this in, no butter. And I do I do butter my pans, always with butter. I find that when I'm buttering my pans, the best way to do it is to melt the butter and brush a light coating of the butter on. And then, of course, you could always do flour after, but this cake does not require this. And if you give me 1 second, I baked one of these this morning. I'm going to pull it out of my pantry so you can see it. So that's all I do. That's it. That's ready. Let me go into my pantry and grab my finished cake so you can see it. Voila, and it came out beautifully. I'm going to serve this. I do, with a friend of mine, we do lunch once a week for our Hollis seniors. They meet every Thursday. So I'm sorry, once a month. We prepare them lunch. And so I'm in charge of the dessert and the salad. So I'm making this cake and I'm going to slice it in half through the middle. And then I'm going to put a layer of really nice berry jam. And then I'm going to sprinkle powdered sugar on top, and that's going to be it. So it's a super easy cake. You can make it like 3 or 4 days in advance. Just cover it to keep it moist, and you're all set to go. So that is all set. And then let's go ahead and bring over our lamb. So I have my cutting board here. I'm going to bring the lamb over, and I do have the probe still in it. So while it was sitting there, the lamb went from 132 degrees to 139 degrees just sitting there. So just remember, when you take meat out of the oven, you do want to give it the opportunity to rest. That helps to get all the juices back into the meat. But it also allows the meat to come up to temperature, and so that when you cut into that meat, all of the juices don't just, slide across your cutting board. They're all still in the meat. You always want to give it time to rest. All right, let me grab my slicing knife. It's always nice to have a nice slicing knife. And let's see how we do. I'm going to take this lamb and cut it at an angle here. And look at that. Beautiful. This is just the way I like it cooked. It's so moist. And it's got that wonderful crispy side where the fat was. And of course, we have the marinade cooked onto it. Delicious. Perfect. Now let me get a plate and we'll put that on. And guess what I'm having for lunch? I'm having lamb for lunch. I'm so excited. Now, also, if you want, I do have a delicious, let's turn this over. Oh, look at that side. Look at how gorgeous that is. That's a picture. I do have a delicious mint vinaigrette that would be perfect on this. I love a mint vinaigrette versus mint jelly with lamb because the vinegar helps to cut that strong flavor of the lamb. So let me just share, I want to share this with you ladies. So if we go to share screen, I'm going to go ahead and go to my website and make that smaller. So if we go to Food and Fun Recipe Blog, and then in the search bar, I'm going to pop in mint vinaigrette, and up that pops. And there you go. That is your recipe for mint vinaigrette. So do check that out. And that will last for a few days and you can even freeze it. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and I'm going to grab my au gratin, my gratin, and we're going to take a nice amount of that. Oh, this is the best lunch ever. on a nice, cool spring day. Perfect. And I might even treat myself to a glass of white wine. So there we go. There is our recipe. I'm going to go ahead and pop our cake into the oven. That's going to go in for about 45 minutes. And then you want to test it to make sure that your tester comes out clean. Let that sit when it's done. Let it sit in the pan for 1 hour. Don't touch it. And then I take a thin knife around the edge and around the bottom, and the cake pops right out. So let it sit for an hour, and then it's all set. So we are all set. We actually made it through 3 recipes today. Does anybody have any questions before we say goodbye?
Well, one person said, can you make juices of the meat? Can you use juices of the meat to make a gravy? Is there enough juice?
There was really not a lot. There wasn't a lot because I cut off a lot of that fat, and the way it's cooked, so it's not long cooked where a lot of juices would come out. So you can see it just, the beauty of this is that the moisture is still in the meat. Yeah.
And everybody would like to wish you, to tell you to enjoy your lunch, you know?
Thank you.
And it looks beautiful.
It does.
Thank you.
So I want to thank you, Liz, for this wonderful cook-along demonstration. These dishes look extraordinarily wonderful, as everybody has been saying in the chat. And we all learn a lot every single time we hear you. Today's cook-along demonstrations is one of the many upcoming virtual event offerings through New Hampshire AARP and AARP's Virtual Center. To learn more about all of these AARP New Hampshire demonstrations, please contact our website, including coffee and conversations, gentle yoga, which is upcoming, educational webinars, and more cooking demonstrations. Please visit our website. Also, if you're wanting to volunteer for AARP New Hampshire community team, please contact us at New Hampshire AARP. We will also put a link in the chat. We hope that you will join us for our next cook-along demonstration with Liz on Tuesday, April 9th at 2 p.m. We will use the Cook the Book favorites from the Silver Palette Cookbook with Liz, which is an old-timey recipe book from what Liz has said. And the registration for this cook-along demo is on our website, AARP New Hampshire. And we want to thank you for joining us today, and have a wonderful rest of the day. And thank you so very much, Liz. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye. Happy spring.